chapter 16 of the book of Acts. It tells us about one of the missionary trips of Paul in which he came to Philippi. Now, Philippi was actually one of great cities back in the first century in northern Greece. And, you know, I'm excited. I'm really happy to be here because I'm standing literally in the footsteps of Paul. What you see right behind me coming from the west, leading towards the east, is the Egnatian Way. It's called the Via Egnatia, a major road stretching approximately 450 miles, 725 kilometers from the Adriatic coast of the Balkan Peninsula all the way to Albania, right? And then in the west to the Hellespont and Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul. We were there last week. Now, it's interesting because here in this particular booklet, here from the archaeological site, I purchased it. It's great because it gives me all the history. So I'm going to stick with the information that is validated. It says, Via Egnatia is one of the largest military and commercial roads on the ancient world. The axis that connected Rome with its possessions in the east. And it was constructed in the 2nd century BC. It was the first public road made by the Romans outside of Italy. And, you know, as we continue to work our way towards the steps of Paul, we need to recognize that not only is the story about what happened in this location. Right behind me is what they call the little city of Lydia, where they have the encounter where Paul, having gone on the Sabbath to do prayer by the stream, found this woman who believed in the God of Israel. And these are the roads they use. And this will go all the way through to Thessaloniki and all the places that we have covered already in our trip. So I am excited that the Bible tells us historical facts if only we take the time and the effort to find them. In Acts chapter 16, we see how Paul is taking trips. He did 3 missionary major trips, and he came here during the second. And we talk about this particular place, Philippi, as the Greek call it, or Philippi, as we call it in the West. And, you know, one of the things that really makes an impact is how big the city would have been in the first century. And as we study scripture, I want you to recognize one thing. It's not just a city, not the Via Egnatia that we have here, one of the major roads in the ancient world, but the events that happened near this place that paved the way for facilitating the gospel to spread all over the world. Not only do we have now the Roman Empire having dominion over the known world at that time, but it facilitated with roads leading through major cities, and which military can go through, and commercial business can take place, and many people can travel to and fro. Now, why is that relevant to us? Because we need to go back 100 years, or maybe 150 years before Paul, or from Paul, to understand the events that happened nearby here that actually paved the way for the gospel to really expand and reach farther places faster because of all the benefits of being joined together with the Roman Empire. As we continue to learn, and I'm going to read to you some of the important historical evidence that happened near here. There was a major war, as now you have the consolidation of power between, the Roman Empire, because at that time it was the Republic. But what happened was, after Augustus Caesar, and I want to read it to you, after Julius Caesar, he was assassinated in the year 44 BC. At that time, Octavius, who later became Augustus Caesar, was 19 years old. Following this event, Octavius entered into a political alliance known as the Second Triumvirate with Julius Caesar's allies, Marcus, Lepidus, and Mark Antony. In October 42 BC, Octavius and Mark Antony's forces defeated those of Caesar's assassins, which were Brutus, and Cassius, in the Battle of Philippi, which it happened not too far from here. That particular battle, in which Augustus at that time won it, then they divided the kingdom. The republic ended, and now the empire takes place. Mark Antony took care of the eastern side of the Roman Empire, and then Augustus, eventually Caesar, will take the western side from here all the way to Rome, Greece, and Italy, and Rome and Italy. Okay. Now, why is this important? Because this was basically the gateway. That one event, changed the whole the whole structure of the gospel in the first century. Just like the Parthians, there was a peace treaty between the Romans and the Parthians, in which the border of between the Parthians and the Romans was the Euphrates River. And if it wasn't for that particular peace treaty, then the gospel would have never gone east into India and the farthest places of the earth. So that event right here facilitated for the whole world to be unified under one king, in this case, one emperor, Julius Caesar, and then after Augustus Caesar, in which, by the way, gave privileges to the Jewish people to have free worship. And we know this because in Thessaloniki, about 2 hours from here to the west, we have a synagogue, an ancient synagogue where Paul went in as his custom was on the Sabbath. Here we know there was not a synagogue. How do we know? Because he went into a stream that we will go and teach from later, and he met Lydia there on the Sabbath. So that pretty much tells me that there was no Jewish presence here maybe at that time. We're not quite sure, but I could only assume based on the fact that everywhere Paul went, he went into a synagogue, but here he went to the stream because there was nowhere to pray. Again, guys, listen. Archaeological evidence. Follow my my educational ladder. We have archaeology. We have geography. We have cultural backgrounds. We have historical backgrounds. All these things are important to get a greater perspective of the biblical narrative that is teaching us about the footsteps of Paul as to why Paul came here. And if it wasn't for this event, Paul probably could never come here and expand the gospel the way God asked him to do through our Messiah, Yeshua, our Master. The New Testament tells us about certain locations and certain places. Sometimes we read the Bible, but we never really consider looking into these places and understanding where do they live, how do they live, which worship, what type of gods they worship, whether they're Roman citizens or not. Now, this is a prime example of understanding the culture and its cultural background to know really that what happened in the events in chapter 16 is completely connected with the status of the city. And the reason why Paul was so bold to get all the leaders of the community to apologize to him, because he was a Roman citizen. Because a Roman citizen has certain privileges. And he understood that. So let me read you a little bit of the information about the city of Philippi, its origin, its status, and the way the privileges they had under the Greco-Roman world. Now it says, when the Romans defeated the Macedonian Empire in the mid-2nd century BC, Philippi, named after the father of Alexander the Great, came under the Roman control. The Romans divided the former Macedonian kingdom into 4 districts. Philippi was located in the 1st district, although the principal city there was Amphipolis, which I was there earlier, and we did a teaching there. In Acts 16 verse 12 says Philippi was a city of the 1st district of Macedonia, a colony, instead of being the leading city of the district. Philippi became a Roman colony and was named Colonia Lulia Philippensis in honor of Julius Caesar. Shortly thereafter, it became Colonia Augustus Julia Philippensis, honoring Augustus. The city prospered since it presided over an extensive territory, and it was granted, this is important, watch, pay attention, because it's going to be linked directly and connected with the events that would happen in this place with Paul and Lydia, and then after that, Paul got arrested. So please be mindful of this. It says, since the city prospered and it presided over an extensive territory, it was granted legal status as an Italian city. But we are in northern Greece. But it had the status of an Italian city. Now, what does that mean to people? This was legally Italian soil in Macedonia. Thus, no land or poll taxes were levied against the colonists, who enjoyed full citizenship. They enjoyed full Roman citizenship. The law and the judicial system was Roman. The main language in the streets was Latin, not Greek. However, 4 of the people known from the Philippian story have Greek names: Lydia, Epaphroditus, Euodia, and I can't pronounce that very well, Synthesi. Okay, so what do we learn from this? Their social status in Greece. There's a social status in Rome. There's social status in Asia Minor. Now, understanding this piece of information gives us a greater detail to the story behind the story. When Paul is in jail, when Paul now is demanding from the leadership, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. And they all got scared. Why? Because full citizenship, and according to Roman law, and I already did a teaching on this, about the privileges of the Roman citizen. The moment Paul says, I'm a Roman citizen, although he was Jewish, immediately the whole community says, we're in trouble. Because they did it without cause, without the proper justice system. And therefore, now we understand that this place here, Paul understood the way and how to use the Roman law when he had to, because he had the status. And now we know that the people like Lydia who lived here was a woman of status. Now we know that the congregation in Philippians was a congregation of status, not only people who were slaves, but also people in the upper status of the caste system of Rome, which, by the way, is important, because if we know the importance of the city and the people who lived here, and they were Roman citizens, imagine how quickly the gospel message can go throughout all this area if the people preaching it are also Roman citizens. Now they have access, free access, all the way to the Balkans, all the way to the Via Egnatia, where they're all walking through on the highway of the ancient world. So understanding the culture and understanding geography and understanding its history helps us understand the narrative of the New Testament and why Paul responded in the way he did in the book of Acts, chapter 16. The biblical accuracy is uncanny. When we come to the city of Philippi, we look for signs, geographical locations. And here we are at the river or the stream in which Paul came to pray when Lydia accepted the gospel. In the book of Acts, chapter 16, verse 11 says, and putting out the sea from Troas, we sailed straight course to Samothrace, and on the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, the city where we're standing right now. Verse 13, on the day of the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate. The city gate would have been not too far from here. We are on the west side right now of the city. And it says, we went outside the city gate beside the river. And here it is, where we thought there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoken to the women assembled there. Now, what's interesting, in Lydia, which by the way, this town here is called Lydia, as a remembrance to the woman who converted her here. But she was from Thyatira. She was from Asia Minor. She was somebody of status because she used to sell purple. That was a very highly regarded type of material and color, as it is the techelet for the people of Israel. But what I'm really amazed by is the accuracy of the Bible. Not only is the scripture telling us a story of a woman who accepted the gospel of high status, in which, by the way, immediately in the event of chapter 16, Paul later goes to the marketplace. He is arrested after he takes the evil spirit from that young lady who's doing for divination, and he is taken to the marketplace where he used to preach from the bema to all the audiences coming through the main city, the main walkway of the city and the agora. But what I'm really want to emphasize is the importance of the Bible as a GPS, for lack of a better word. Tells us where he went from Troas. He went to certain islands. He got to Apollonia, I think it was, and then he went to Amphipolis, and then he came to Philippi, and then he comes right by the river. So we can literally follow the steps of Paul. And yet this is another example of how the Bible is relating the story, that now the gospel is being preached to all the nations, and it's not reaching just the slaves or the freedmen. Now it's making an impact of people of social status, with money, with status, Roman citizens, and in this case, a woman who was with money, who had resources. She was baptized somewhere in this river. Now it's become a traditional church, but it's so near to where the gate of the city used to be, that more than likely, from 1 to 10, 10 being the place, this pretty much is an 8, in my opinion. Again, in the book of Acts, chapter 16, we see that Paul is taking a ship from Troas, and he ends up in Neapolis. From Neapolis, this is the road that he will go up to get to the city of Philippi. An amazing feat of Roman engineering, in which now they have roads connecting the whole ancient world, so that they can, the armies can come through here. So we know now that Paul walked in this road. Timothy walked with him. Mark came with him. Silas came with him. So we are literally walking in the footsteps of Paul. We are about maybe 35 minutes away from Philippi, and this is right below the modern day highway among the mountains. And we are actually going north up the hill, and we took a video when we were coming up from the north towards here. So it's really amazing how the Romans knew what they were doing, and we see the evidence even to this day. We still have the ancient road of Via Egnatia.